South Dakota's Secretary of State has opened up about her support for a push to ensure U.S. citizen-only voting in South Dakota. Dakota Territory's Blake Trolley sat down with the Secretary as the requirement still has some hurdles ahead.
Senate Joint Resolution 503 will allow voters to decide next year whether they want language added to South Dakota's Constitution clarifying that only U.S. citizens can vote in state and local elections. South Dakota Secretary of State Monet Johnson supported the legislation, even attending a press conference about it earlier this year.
Why was it important for you to support that legislation?
One thing within people's minds, only U.S. citizens should be voting in elections. So I wanted to support the legislators that brought that forward, and just to ensure people that that is what we're doing, and that's what they're cleaning up all across the nation, is only U.S. citizens voting in elections.
Supporters of the amendment say they worry that under current language, some cities with home rule charters in South Dakota could possibly allow non-citizens to vote if the cities want to. Those supporters cite a law review article by a University of Kentucky law professor who said South Dakota home rule municipalities could legalize non-citizens voting in local elections without approval from the legislature. Supporters cite other places where non-citizens are allowed to vote, including in cities in California, Illinois, and Maryland. SJR 503's prime sponsors Rapid City State Senator Taffy Howard. The legislation was co-sponsored by other West River lawmakers, including State Senator Amber Hulse. Hulse sent Dakota Territory News a statement saying, "The resolution is a responsible step in ensuring that our elections are secure and that every vote cast reflects the will of the people who call this country home." In Rapid City, Blake Trolley, Dakota Territory News.